This is Talk Easy. I'm Sam Fragoso. Welcome to the show. Arundhati Roy, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
This new book is called Mother Mary Comes to Me. And it's mostly about your mother and not that much about the Beatles, just so everyone knows this. When you were writing your first book, The God of Small Things, it took years and years and years until you found the structure of the novel. You said the story came to me as a sort of rhythm, a phantom drum beat that I was trying to get the measure of. So tell me, did this memoir come to you in similar ways?
I think in terms of structure, maybe it's the most linear book I've written, although it still does do odd journeys.
Mm-hmm.
It came to me in strange ways in that somehow I am a person who, even though I'm a writer, because I studied architecture and because I work in cinema, things often come to me as images, but not necessarily as filmic images. Somehow they are literary images.
And what was the image, the still image that came to mind?
The still image was my very impressive 89-year-old woman, mother, being bathed by 4 helpers, like this feudal queen, and in the steamy bathroom. And she always sort of invited me in as a spectacle, and she would say, "Okay, would you like to take a picture of your mother being bathed?" And I'd be like, "Okay, but I won't show it to anyone." And she said, "But then what's the point?" So, yeah.
Your mother, she passed away almost 3 years ago now, right?
Yes,
she passed away
September 2022.
Yeah. And when she did, you said, "I couldn't write anything else until I wrote this. I was shocked by the quality of my grief." What shocked you about your own response?
So what shocked me was, and I think I said in the book, I was a little ashamed at the intensity of my grief because, first of all, she was 89 and, it oughtn't to come as a shock, but it did for a whole host of reasons. But I had a very, obviously that's what the whole book is about. I left home when I was 16 to study architecture. By 18, I stopped going home because I had a very difficult but interesting relationship with her. I didn't leave home because I hated her or anything. I just left home because I wanted to continue to love her, and she was an impossible person to be around. For me as her child. I was shocked because at my own grief, because I had spent so much of my life trying to create a sort of safe distance from her in order to be able to love her without allowing her to destroy me. And when she died, I was shocked at how destroyed I was by that. It's almost like you make yourself into this strange shape to accommodate a very difficult person who takes up a lot of the oxygen in your life, and yet she's an important person in your life. So you make yourself this strange shape, and when that person goes away, you don't understand, or there's no reason for you to be that shape, but you are now.
How would you describe the mother that you needed to make a weird shape for, that you needed distance from?
Well, it took me a whole book to do that. How would I describe her? I have tried to, and you end up sort of repeating yourself sometimes, but the point is that you can't not when you're talking about a book that you've written. So I've described her as an airport with no runways, where you have to keep this aircraft in the air all the time. And she's somebody who you cannot come to a conclusion about, because you form an opinion and then it gets overturned the next minute, or you have a feeling and then it gets diffused the next minute. For me, it was a writing challenge, because I believed that this woman deserves to be in the pages of literature and history. And can I communicate that inability to come to conclusions about a person in a book? Can I present her in all her aspects without, tying a ribbon around her and handing her to a reader in a neat package?
But before you had to write about her, you had to live with her.
Yes, I certainly did.
Tell me about that.
Well, she comes from a very traditional, conservative community, tiny minority community in Kerala, South India, called the Syrian Christians. And she had a very, very, very cruel father. So she used to tell me that she married the first man she could just to get away from her father. And that was my father. And she moved to Assam, which is in the northeast of India, where she lived with him, had 2 children, and then, very soon she discovered he was addicted to alcohol, so she left him. And so she was on her own with 2 very young children.
You and your brother.
Me and my brother, with only a bachelor's degree in education, but no money, nothing. And then she eventually returned to the place that she left. Her own father had died by then, but she returned to this community where she was sort of humiliated, and she kind of communicated that humiliation, or downloaded that humiliation onto the only 2 people who she had power over.
Humiliated how?
Being a woman who was divorced, a woman who had married outside the community, a woman who didn't have money at that point and therefore was living in the house, a sort of family house. So even the people, the cook or the persons who used to work in this house, which was my grandmother's sister's house in a village, would tell us, it's so shameless, you don't have a father. And there was that sense of her being somebody who had broken and transgressed all the rules and then was helpless until she started her own school and then grew to become the empress of that place.
So when you say that she took out her humiliation on the only 2 people she could, what did that look like?
That looked like unpredictable rage against my brother and me. Both of us have arguments over whether she was worse with him or worse with me. But I think my brother was more vulnerable than me because he remembered my father and he remembered a better life. He's a little bit older than me. And so, so he was quieter, and she terrified him. And me, I didn't remember that good life at all.
You didn't remember him.
I didn't remember my father, and I didn't remember a home, and I was just born into this cracked and broken space already. So I was prepared for it, I suppose, or whatever. But also the thing is that my mother, she grew so angry at what had happened to her. And one of the things that happened was that, when she left her husband, my father, she moved into a little cottage that belonged to her father, who was dead. And then her brother and her mother came to evict us and say that as a daughter, you don't have the right to this. So she all her rage against men, she took out on my brother. She used to call him a male chauvinist pig, and she called him all sorts of things. And as we grew up, and as she became a woman who challenged the inheritance laws, and she started this school, and she did so much for her girl students. So for me, the redeeming thing was that at least the public battles she fought for women were for me too, not as a daughter, but as a woman. But for him, it was just pretty unredeeming, So he's a little puzzled at why I have this ambiguous and sometimes deep love for her, which he doesn't feel.
As a kid, you write in the book that you looked through the keyhole and you saw him get hit. He read that, I assume. Did he remember that moment?
Of course he did. I think he remembered, but I think it was hard for him because the book brings a lot of memories, that it's not that you forget, but you try to just put them in another chamber.
Is that what you had done before writing this book?
No, I had not. I had lived with everything. I had taken notes about everything in my head, and and the thing is that I ran. I left, and I tried to make another world for myself outside. Not just outside her home, but outside Kerala. I was in the north. I was in Delhi. I was a vagabond and a vagrant, But he was there, and his daughter studied in her school, and his wife now looks after the school. So he never, he never separated.
There was no distance.
Yeah, there was no distance. So the wounds were constantly being, revisited, although the really early memories were blocked out.
The image of you looking through the keyhole and seeing him being hit by your mother. When you were a young girl and you saw that, did you wonder why that was happening? Did it make sense to you?
No, I mean, I knew why it was happening. We didn't have a home. She had started a school, and then she started a little hostel, like a boarding school. So there were other children in this little house, and so the hitting and the stuff was happening in a whisper at night. And I watched that beating, and then I came back to bed, and he came back, and we both pretended that we were asleep, and we both knew we weren't. And in the morning she woke me up and hugged me and said, "You have a brilliant report." And that made me hate myself and feel that.
Why did that make you hate yourself?
Because I just felt that when you're applauded, someone quiet is being beaten in the other room, and that became a very political thing for me, and it remains so. Like, I feel even now, if I'm speaking or if I've written a book and if people love it, or I say something and whatever, I feel like, yeah, but the people in Gaza are getting beaten, killed, exterminated in some way. So there's always that sense that someone quiet is suffering.
To you, your success is inextricably linked to the people you're writing about.
See, I don't know what success means, but is it success when everything you write about, every battle that you have fought has been lost? The dam that you wrote so much about, that you walked with, the people that fought against it, has been built. The forests have been cut. So what is success?
Right.
What is success? Is that success? Or it's a very shallow understanding of success, really. So I don't know what we mean by these things unless you look at it in some individual way, but I don't look at it like that,
Yeah, it's almost like with each quote unquote shallow success, it is a reminder of
a deeper pain, and not a personal one necessarily, but a part of battles for a world, for a worldview, for another kind of world that we will all continue to fight for, whether we win or we don't win. But we certainly can't call ourselves successful,
I think the germinating images in both The God of Small Things and The Ministry of Utmost Happiness are children born into resistance and chaos. In Small Things, it's a pair of 7-year-old twins and a sky blue Plymouth stuck at a railway crossing while a communist demonstration unfurls around them. In Ministry, it's a abandoned girl that appears at midnight on a sidewalk in Delhi, in a place where many, many protests occurred. These read and feel like the nerve centers of each novel. And I wondered, is there a passage in this memoir that we could read that you see in similar terms? Like, what is the nerve center of Mother Mary Comes to Me?
I think it was interesting for me in the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, or in the God of Small Things, or maybe in Mother Mary Comes to Me, that there's the huge things that are happening in the world that are addressed. Whether it's nuclear weapons, or whether it's what's happening in Kashmir in India, or whatever it is, whether it's 9/11, today's 9/11. But then there are children who are there inside that political moment, and those children are unprotected in some way. And in the case of the Ministry, you have these huge political movements surging around them, hunger strikes, speeches, conversations, and yet all these great ideologies just don't know what to do with the baby that's appeared suddenly on the pavement. What do you do with that baby, when the God of Small Things came out, my mother checked herself into hospital because she was worried about what secrets the book might reveal. And then when she realized it didn't, she called me and she wanted to ask me about a particular part in the book. And there's a part in the book where, in the God of Small Things, where I said, Esther and Rahel remembered their parents when they fought and how they grew huge like giants, and the parents pushed them from one to the other, saying, you take them, I don't want them. And my mother called me to her bedside and she said, how do you remember this? And I said, I don't remember it. It's just fiction. And she said, no, it's not. And so there again, you have this kind of recurring theme of unwanted children, I guess. And I didn't think about it until now, but yeah.
And instead of reading from the memoir, why don't we read from the end of chapter 2 of The God of Small Things, the passage that your mother wanted to ask you about?
Okay.
I have it pulled here. I believe it starts with the highlighted.
When they were alone, Esther and Rahel sometimes pretended they were clerks. They would blow spit bubbles and shiver their legs and gobble like turkeys. They remembered their father, who they had known between wars. He once gave them puffs from his cigarette and got annoyed because they had sucked it and wet the filter with spit. It's not a ruddy sweet, he said, genuinely angry. They remembered his anger and Ammu's. They remembered being pushed around a room once from Ammu to Baba like billiard balls. Ammu pushing Esther away. Here, you keep one of them. I can't look after them both. Later, when Esther asked Ammu about that, she hugged him and said he mustn't imagine things. And it's just the opposite of what is in Mother Mary Comes to Me. Yes.
I want to know that your mother created this school, right? And you called the school revolutionary. That what she did for her girl students, the spirit she instilled in them, was nothing short of revolutionary. She gave them spines. She gave them wings. She set them free. That revolution, like all revolutions, came at a cost. So who paid?
My brother and I. But I mean, we argue about this, but I think he more than me and he thinks me more than him. The next chapter is the one that we've already discussed about, what happened with him and the beating him in the room. And so there was a way in which she made this beautiful school, and then he and I were expected to call her Mrs. Roy and in public, but there was no private because home and school and everything was one thing. And she I think, was very worried that the other little children should not think that we were in any way special. So she sometimes was extra punitive with us. So I always say that, there are people who have a calling, whether they are, scientists or poets or singers, people whose lives are so full of their art or the thing that they do, that sometimes the space for children is far more restricted than for other people. They don't prioritize their children, or they can be even cruel to their children. It's nothing special or new. It was just that our mother's calling was other people's children, so it was a little difficult, but interesting.
Your mother's calling was other people's children.
Yep.
How did her treatment of your brother affect your understanding of feminism?
Well, if feminism is such a broad word, but if we just take the broadest meaning of it, the fight for equality and rights and space for women in the world. But in fact, recently when I was in Delhi, somebody stood up and asked me a question, and a little hostile. She said, "Do you know that your mother was revered in feminist circles, and that all of us were so devastated when she died, and we all signed these condolence letters?" And also, I said, "Yes, I know." It was asked as if I didn't know what a iconic person she was. I said, "Of course I know, but that doesn't give you the right to call a 4-year-old boy who's your son a male chauvinist pig, and sort of hold him responsible for what men have done in the world."
Or to say to you, "You're a millstone around my neck. I should have dumped you in an orphanage the day you were born."
Yeah, that was one of the themes, yes.
That was a recurring theme.
That was a recurring theme.
So how do you hold those two? Because I saw when your mother passed, I went on Facebook, and there were hundreds of people, former students of hers, who wrote these lovely, loving things about your mother. And then I, of course, read your book, and it's hard.
But both things are true.
100%.
Both things are true. And the point is that I'm a grown woman now. I'm not an infant, and I'm not a child that doesn't understand that both things are true, both things are important, and those generations of students she brought up and the battles she fought are important. And I'm aware that it's not only that those other children received gifts from her. I did too. And I did too. I mean, there's a lot I learned from the darkness as well as from the light. It wasn't just unmitigated horror from her, even towards me. She taught me things. She read me things. She opened my world to literature. And the enterprise in this book was to talk about it all without judging, or, I mean, almost like reporting it.
Yes.
And saying, okay, this is what happened. And fortunately, I'm all right, so I can tell you that this is what is so unresolvable about her.
Tell me the good things that you still hold.
The good things, well,
The things that she taught you.
first of all, the first thing is that she was aware that I, especially as a girl growing up in this community that did not believe that I was a part of it, that I was not offered those protections, that I was not going to quote unquote marry someone or get I was not considered a proper Syrian Christian. So she, from a very early, from the time I was very young, was prepared me for that, that somehow there was the sense that you're going to be bigger and better, or you're going to escape. She did that. She also was the person who would order these, even when we were living in this little village, she would order these books from another city. She introduced me to literature. She read me Shakespeare. She read me Kipling. She used to tell me, okay, what happened at school today? Write it down. So there's a part in Mother Mary Comes to Me where I said she taught me to write, and then she raged against the writer I became. She taught me to think, and then she raged against my thoughts. She taught me to be free, and then she raged against my freedom. But she did teach me all those things,
Yeah, she gave you the A side, and
Yeah.
you had to take the B side.
Yeah, and it was okay. I took it, and even the B side, I think I learned to read the darkness, to stare at it until it gave up its secrets, and to say it's okay. I have to. And she. And the other thing, that's not a gift, but that is something that she was a severe asthmatic, severe. So I could not. In a way, this book is all the conversations I could not have with her, because you could not say anything, otherwise she was going to get asthma and go to hospital and die. So I learned to just keep quiet and just think about things. But she used to tell me constantly that I'm going to die, and what will you do, and all that. So
For decades, she said
for
this, though.
decades, yeah. So from a very young age, of course, you passed through these moments of terror when you knew that you couldn't survive if she didn't. But then, as a teenager, I began to think of survival very early on. How am I going to manage? How am I going to manage? And that built a sort of resilience in me, I think.
Did you feel like you couldn't write this book, let alone publish this book, until she passed?
Obviously, because like I say in the book, it's not that I couldn't write a book. I could not ask her, why did you shoot my dog? Or why did... I never could say anything because of the asthma, So you could not say anything ever.
Because if you produced enough anger or rage, she could go into an
No,
asthmatic.
it didn't have to be rage. It just had to be silence, because if you questioned anything, it could result in that, So it was, it also, even that helped me, to right now keep my cool. I'm on stage and some right-wing goon is smashing it up, and I'm just sitting there because I've learned to just watch things,
My last part before we move on is do you think the conditions of your childhood, the absorption of her darkness, as you said, the energy directed toward decrypting and surviving your day to day, do you think that laid the foundation for you to become a writer?
Well, there's no empirical way I can say yes, but yes, I certainly think so, because it was as a, I think children, when they're young, you know, they just react to stimulus, whereas I learned not to react to stimulus. I learned to think about everything. I learned to keep quiet. I learned to sit at the river and work it out. I learned to watch the chemical reaction of how humiliation was passed on from the community or from her brother or from her father, the stories of her father to her, and then how it was passed down to me. So there was a lot of contemplation at an age when you should not be contemplating.
And yet you did.
I did.
When did you know that you had to leave?
Well, when I sort of became a teenager, just my presence, my adolescence, my body used to enrage her in some ways. And I think the most important thing was, there's a part in my book where I say when I was very young and she was having these asthma attacks, I would be, I'll breathe for you. I'll breathe for you. And I refer to myself as her valiant organ child, like her external lung that wanted to breathe for her. And then as the anger and the conflict grew when I entered the gates of the School of Architecture and I saw these stoned students, and I realized that there was another world that was possible. I wanted to sort of bow down and kiss the ground of the filthy car park at the stoned students, and my lungs returned to my body and started breathing for me. And she sensed that immediately, that dependence was drifting away, the control was going, and that made her more and more angry, and it made me more and more fuck you, like it made me, the Beatles and the rock and roll and everything had started, the smoking, the stoning, and so when I was just being attacked in my head, I would just be going like, yeah, 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 okay, I'm out of here very, very soon.
When you do leave home and you're studying architecture, what was it like to breathe for the first time?
Oh, it was just fabulous. It was just fabulous. It was just fabulous. The School of Architecture was, for me, it was like paradise full of cigarette stubs. It was just like a really anarchic place. And as I said, I was in the hostel, so there were people from everywhere, completely different from the people I knew in Kerala, completely different from the people I'd studied in school with. Brilliantly talented, this wild graffiti, no rules. There were hardly any girls, so there was no sort of proper hostel for us. We were just like set sail in this crazy river. We worked night and day. We worked really, really, really hard.
On what?
And on our drawings, on what they were, what were called submissions, so you just didn't get time to sleep almost. That it was that hard, the coursework. So, but it was fantastic. The place was just decrepit and broken down, and
It was dilapidated, it was downtrodden, it was perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was perfect. If I had to do it all over again, I would study architecture all over again, because for me, it taught me so much, about how to look at things. And by the time I was in fourth or fifth year, I was very interested in cities and city planning and who's excluded, who's included. It's the foundation of the politics and also of the way I structure my writing. So architecture to me does not just mean building buildings. Apart from the fact that between that and what I do now, I worked in cinema, I worked as a production designer, and all of those things inform my writing.
After you work in film and you start writing this novel, it's my understanding that you're living in a house and you made an arrangement that from the morning to 2 p.m., I'm going to lock the door and I'm going to write.
One of the two rooms, and lock the door of one of our two rooms.
No one can bother you. What you were writing, you did not know. Where you were going, you did not know. How to do it, who knows? And yet you found your way. So tell me how you began to do that.
Well, I had written and worked on 2 feature films. I bought a computer, and it was the first time I was just experimenting, writing on a computer. And I just wanted to think about what I would think about if I didn't have to negotiate with budgets and actors and schedules and all that stuff. So I just started to try and sometimes someone asks me, how's it going when I'm writing something? And I say, I don't write, I just wait. So I just waited to see what I would think about.
Well, you wait for what?
To see what I would think about, who would come visiting, and all the, my river that I grew up on, and the pickle factory, and my grandmother and her violin, and the violence, and everything came to me, and I just started to write. But obviously the first image was what you said, a pair of twins stuck in a Plymouth advertising pickles on the roof and a communist procession swirling around it.
Do you want to read from it?
Sure. Oh, have you marked it up?
Oh, it's been marked.
In a purely practical sense, it would probably be correct to say that it all began when Sophie Moll came to Imanum. Perhaps it's true that things can change in a day, that a few dozen hours can affect the outcome of whole lifetimes. And that when they do, those few dozen hours, like the salvaged remains of a burned house, the charred clock, the singed photograph, the scorched furniture, must be resurrected from the ruins and examined, preserved, accounted for. Little events, ordinary things, smashed and reconstituted, imbued with new meaning. Suddenly they become the bleached bones of a story. Still, to say that it all began when Sophie Moll came to Imanum is only one way of looking at it. However, for practical purposes, in a hopelessly practical world, it was a sky blue day in December 1969, the 19 silent. It was the kind of time in the life of a family when something happens to nudge its hidden morality from its resting place and make it bubble to the surface and float for a while, in clear view, for everyone to see. A sky blue Plymouth with the sun in its tail fins sped past young rice fields and old rubber trees on its way to Cochin. Further east, in a small country with similar landscape, jungles, rivers, rice fields, communists, enough bombs were being dropped to cover all of it in 6 inches of steel. Here, however, it was peacetime, and the family in the Plymouth traveled without fear or foreboding. The Plymouth used to belong to Papachi, Rahel and Esther's grandfather. Now that he was dead, it belonged to Mamachi, their grandmother, and Rahel and Esther were on their way to Cochin to see The Sound of Music for the 3rd time. They knew all the songs.
You know, you're the first writer that we've had on the show who looks up and at me while they're reading from the book.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, one part of it is that you seem to know the words,
I do.
which is shocking because it was so long ago. It's almost like an actor knowing their lines.
You know, that's because for me, writing is an audio track. It's like remembering a song from a long time ago.
Oh,
I hear what I write. I hear the rhythm of the words as an audio track. So in fact, when I was reading Mother Mary Comes to Me, the audiobook, I finished reading it way before schedule because it was just like speaking. And I said, what do you think? The people might think it's a scam. I'm just talking and there's no book, you know, because I hear my writing.
you know, from those pages, like in the aftermath of the pages you just read, you're catapulted into this literary world where you're celebrated for, I was going to say success, but as we talked about earlier,
Now you can't say success.
a shallow
See.
kind of success.
Yes.
And very quickly, as one newspaper described, you went from darling to dissident to national critic of India.
National critic of India is a polite way of putting it.
Yes.
No, they say anti-national, traitor, sedition, terrorist, and all that stuff.
Okay. Well, I did leave that part out, but I'm glad you're putting it on the tape. It's much better coming from you than me.
True.
Was there a moment that you remember having a kind of political awakening?
What happened is that after The God of Small Things was published, and particularly after it won the Booker Prize, even as I was being dragged to court for corrupting public morality, the 5 lawyers, every few years, 5 male lawyers drag me to court on some criminal charge.
And how did you corrupt public morality?
So they said I had corrupted public morality, and I asked my lawyer, can we not just say that there's a technical flaw here, because was public morality pure till I came along. I mean, could it be like further corrupting public morality?
Mhm.
But it was, I think they were just furious about a lot of things, especially the left at that point, because of the politics of caste in the book. But anyway, to answer your previous question, the book came out and then it won the Booker Prize, and I was on the cover of every magazine and so on. And just around then, the Hindu right came to power. And the first thing it did was to do the series of nuclear tests. And I was so shocked at the grotesqueness of the kind of public language that suddenly these tests gave permission for people to use. And I was shocked at the kinds of people that were celebrating these tests. And I realized that if I kept quiet, it would be assumed, because I was so much in the public eye, that I too was part of the cheerleaders and the brigade of nationalism.
Right.
So I wrote this essay called The End of Imagination, where I talked about what does it do to a people, not whether or not nuclear weapons are used, what does it do to your imagination? What is this making us, And when I wrote that, it took less than 3 seconds for me to be kicked off my fairy princess literary award winning whatever it was, and be told to go to Pakistan and you're an anti-national and you hate your country and so on. And it came as some kind of relief, because given my background, I was not used to adulation and
Were you more comfortable with the threats than the adulation?
Definitely. Because it liberated me in some way, because adulation and fame and prizes and all of that is also a kind of trap. You walk into it and then you're supposed to attempt to replicate that for the rest of your life. And I was just not in that game.
So for years, on the front door of your house, you had little green, blue, and yellow stickers that read, "We have to be careful these days. No, we have to be very careful these days because..."
That's just a joke. I mean, I don't know how you know that, but that's just a joke. Actually, before that, I had a sticker which said, "Do I look like a motherfucking role model?" And then my neighbor came to me and said, "I really like the sticker about motherhood on your door." So I said, "Oh no, I'll take this off." So, yeah.
"Do I look like a motherfucking role model?"
Mm.
is really, I think that's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Can you send me that one? I'll take that.
If people, it's good as long as people don't mistake it for some platitude about motherhood.
But these jokes,
Yeah.
Underneath most good jokes, a little bit of truth.
Well, it turns out to be, for sure, a little bit of truth, because, today in India, only a fool would think that you didn't have to be very careful. But only...
When you said a fool, you really looked at me in a very intense way. Are you...
No, but you're not living in India. I was just thinking about the fools I'm thinking about.
Okay. Do they have long hair like me?
No, they don't. I wish they did, but they don't. But you have to be careful. But at the same time, if that carefulness means that you keep quiet, that's even worse.
Well, you have done anything but keep quiet. I mean, your political essays have produced police cases, legal notices, court appearances, a short jail sentence. A reader recently told you, "The reason I like your writing is because you write as though they've already killed you."
Yes, that's true.
You don't hold back. Do you write these essays as if it could be your last?
Yeah, but not because I feel that I'm going to be killed, but because, each time I write something, it leads to something else and something else. And it's not just jail sentences for me, but I have seen, my friends being jailed, dying, being killed. And sometimes I just feel that I'm not going to do it again. And then it becomes harder to keep quiet than to write it.
No,
Every time I write something, it's because I can't not write it.
we're talking in the aftermath of a right-wing commentator who wrote political essays on the far other end of the spectrum than you, was gunned down. Political violence in this country, just like everywhere else, is rising.
I mean, a friend of mine was gunned down too. I mean, a few years ago, 2017, I think, called Gauri Lankesh. So it happens in India. Many people are gunned down. Many people are in jail. But it's not like the US because everybody doesn't go around with guns,
But how do you hold that? I mean, how do you continue onward when the threat is not theory, but real?
Again, I don't want to overstate this threat, because when I say you have to be very careful, you have to consider it. You have to understand it. You can't just write the first draft of what you feel. You have to think about it. There are tripwires everywhere, and then you have to do it. Because if you don't, you're also putting yourself into some prison of your own. Then you should stop writing and teach yoga or something.
In 2002, you wrote that fighting fascism, I think it's quite timely for this, means putting your ear to the ground and listening to the whispering of the truly powerless, a group that comprises the majority. Is that the same prescription you would offer for fighting fascism in 2025?
Well, I'll tell you what's changed in India. Something that what happened in India in 2014 is what is so similar to what is happening in the US in 2025.
How do you mean?
The right-wing BJP came to power, and sometimes the similarities are so unnerving that you want to know, is there a actual physical playbook? I mean, does it have pages that you can turn? Because the attacks on universities, the attacks on the economy, the attacks on citizenship, the attacks on minorities, the racism, all of that.
The recent militarization of the police and the National Guard.
Yes, and well, in India, the militarization of the police and the politicization of the military, because in places like Kashmir, the military acts like the police, and in places like Central India, which I've written about, the police acts like the military. But there's this kind of valorization of national pride and national security, and everybody's brain is a national flag, quickly losing IQ, all of that happened. As I often say, the only difference is that your coup of January 6th might have failed. In our case, the guys with the antlers and furs rule us now, because it in some ways succeeded, and it's a much more organized enterprise over there, because the organization called the RSS, to which the Prime Minister and most of the ministers in the Hindu right belong in India, is 100 years. It'll be celebrating its 100th year. Very, very organized, has penetrated every institution. The mainstream media, owned by corporates, have enabled this violent lynch mob mentality. I would say they're a criminal enterprise, the mainstream media in India. But so that's a situation that we find ourselves in now, except that we are 10 years into it. And the dangerous thing is that it has been normalized. So the powerless people have been brainwashed into feeling they are some sort of a majority, and they have been falsely empowered by the right to indulge in sort of paroxysms of violence against Muslims, for example, every now and then. And the frustration of not having work or not having money is sort of channeled into, okay, you can be a part of this mob with swords and call for the rape of Muslim women, or you can murder people in public, and you can become a very important political person if you've actually gone out and done some killing and some mass murder. You can hold high office. So what I meant by powerless in 2002 now has a different meaning.
So there are clear parallels between Hindu nationalists and the MAGA movement.
Yes.
Is almost as a warning, I guess I'm asking you, like almost as a warning for us, since India is 11 years in now, and we are at the beginning of this new horrifying chapter. Is there something that you could foresee in this country that would play out much like what played back home?
Well, I think that we should be very cognizant of the fact that the left and the divisiveness of the left. I mean, this loose word that we use, where everybody a few years ago and was encouraged to seal themselves into silos and to refuse all kinds of solidarity, because solidarity can never be perfect. It's imperfect, but if you do not understand that solidarity is all that we have, people in Gaza cannot fight that battle alone. They need us. They need everybody possible on the streets of every country all over the world. And if we don't have solidarity, you're going to lose, and you cannot regain what you have lost in a minute. Today, it's not the government, it's not government policies, it's not the police that is the danger. It is the popular imagination that is the danger. And once that happens, how do you unmake that,
So your call is for what? The acceptance of imperfect allies?
Yes, of understanding things as deeply as you can, of understanding that nobody can fight this battle alone. Everybody has to somehow join forces and make space for each other, and has to stand up, because the minute you cede ground, already a lot of ground has been ceded, you're not going to get that back.
They often say that politics is downstream from culture. Is there a way, when we talk about the public imagination, how do we go about expanding that? Because the stories we're telling, the stories we've been telling, the stories we've been telling ourselves, they don't seem to be working anymore. I mean, trust in the Democratic Party is at an all-time low. The support for the movements that you mentioned in 2020, 2021, whether it was around, Black Lives Matter, defund the police, even the Palestinian rights in Gaza, has wavered in parts of this country.
Well, politics is downstream of culture, and the right wing, both in India and here, are so busy producing culture and producing, stuff. And I mean, long ago, I remember speaking in the US and saying that the Democrats and the Republicans were like two brands of washing powder, Tide and Ivory Snow or whatever. All of them underwritten by the same corporates, the same weapons industry. How important it is. There was a time when weapons were made to fight wars. Now wars are manufactured to sell weapons, and economies boom when there are wars. And America is a war machine, and people who just limit their politics to Democrats and Republicans have refused to see that. The Democrats have been so aggressive in the world, and whether it's Democrats or Republicans, you just look at the number of countries that they have destroyed between them, even since 9/11. It's unbelievable, allied with Israel, of course. And now a country like India, once a friend of Palestine, is also allied with this.
I do want to offer some amount of clarity, or I want to at least try to, which I think can be found in history. And I just want to go back to a quote. This is from 2007. You said in The Guardian, "I certainly do not volunteer to tell Iraqis or Palestinians that if they went on a mass hunger strike, they would get rid of military occupation. Civil disobedience doesn't seem to be paying dividends. This was in 2007. And I read that and I thought, oh my God, like, if civil disobedience won't pay dividends, what will?
Because, see, I've written a lot about Gandhi and nonviolence and the satyagraha and so on. And I'll say that, civil disobedience works when you have an audience, when that audience is sympathetic. But
Right.
I started thinking about it when I was deep inside the forest amongst indigenous people in India who were being pushed off their lands. Their villages were being burnt. They were being raped. They were being moved out in their tens of thousands for mining companies. And so they were fighting back, not non-violently. And people, I said, what do you want them to do? Like, they live 5 days walk from any road. There's no television. They don't have any money to boycott any goods. They're already hungry. They can't go on a hunger strike. So what are you supposed to do when thousands of policemen arrive at night and burn down your village? And it isn't as if people have not tried all of that in Palestine, So I just feel that the world has to just stop being hypocritical, Of course, civil disobedience will work, but then the rest of the world has to be in solidarity, It can't just leave them to their civil disobedience and then watch them being mowed down and watch them being burnt down. I mean, the West Bank, they didn't do anything, but they are being pushed out of their homes, they're being leveled, they're being taken over.
2 years now, we've seen what's been happening. Has your understanding of the conflict changed or evolved in that time?
It has not changed.
How do you see it now?
I just see it as something that's gone beyond politics and entered some psychotic phase. I'm talking about starving children, killing journalists, bombing hospitals, putting out these videos of soldiers, dressed in women's lingerie, of the women they've massacred, of people, leaders, Israeli Defense Force and government openly boasting about the fact that these are human animals and they need to be exterminated. And it didn't start here. I did a talk in 2002 where I quoted Churchill and all the various, prime ministers of Israel saying the very same thing. So history did not begin on October 7th, And now what you're seeing, though, from a time when very few people in the United States were willing to talk about it, you're seeing a whole generation of young people coming out, of Jewish people, of all kinds of people speaking out. But what you're also seeing is all of us being forced to watch this genocide on our cell phones while we eat, while we drink, while we read, while you and I talk. We watch it. Our lives are infused with it, and that also creates a kind of psychosis, I think, for us. And under the rubble of Gaza are not only the dead bodies of Palestinians, but the carcass of Western liberal democracy that today America could today stop it, but it will not.
And the psychosis, how do you work from that place? I mean, how do you continue on from that?
I mean, we continue to protest. We continue to do what, obviously, people who have been working amongst people to awaken them to this, which is why all over the world there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. But what is our crisis? Our crisis is that we live in countries that we call democratic, but there is no representation of the will of the people. But clearly the will of the people is that this war stops. But the will of the military industrial complex is that this war continues, that this these people are exterminated, that those journalists are killed, that those children are starved and maimed and murdered. And we have to live with this. We will be the generation that watched it and tried, I mean, many of us, to talk about it, but didn't succeed. But what has happened is that the one thing that Israel had, which was this legacy of I mean, the history of what happened to the Jewish people, a terrible thing, but now they have squandered it and turned it upon themselves to become the perpetrators of something that they said they would never allow again, but now they themselves are the perpetrators, the state of Israel and those who support it.
When you paused and it felt like you were thinking about something.
No, I was just thinking about the fact that, we have become people who have to keep doing what we do, writing what we write, creating the culture, even in these moments when we feel helpless with anger.
Do you feel helpless?
I do. I do, I do. As I said, I have written about so many things, and yet uh, it isn't as though one succeeded,
Yeah,
in stopping the dam or stopping the genocide or making people in India think what is being done in their name in Kashmir or whatever it is. It is truly. I mean, I'm celebrated as a successful writer, but actually, I'm a deep failure. But fortunately, as you will read in Mother Mary, I am no. For me, being friends with failure does not mean accepting it.
What does that mean?
It means that you don't, you may be defeated, but you'll never be on their side. You may go down, but you'll never be on their side.
Mm. When you were talking about what's happening in the West Bank, I immediately thought to the beginning of this conversation, where you said, just as you said now, that I'm celebrated for all this work. And yet each celebration is ultimately a reminder of a battle not won.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We must win, and I want to. I want these battles to be won. But if we don't win it, we cannot be broken by the fact that we haven't won in one's lifetime. Because what I do think we have achieved is a certain political understanding, which is very, very important. I think that people understand the damage of big dams. I think people understand what they do to the environment. I think people understand what nuclear weapons mean. I think people understand the absolute wickedness that is the occupation and the apartheid perpetrated on the people of Gaza by the Israeli state. I think everybody understands it. And for a writer to help to provide that understanding is in some small way not a defeat. And I'm just saying, that we are a part of history, and there have been other writers and other battles and other sufferings. And so these stories that we tell sometimes are not necessarily that unique, but they are a part of creating the texture of a world that we live in right now, and a world that is not unchanging, and yet we cannot ignore the battles that our elders have fought for us. Other women have fought for the freedoms that I have, and I can't ever think that it's some enterprise all of my own.
Other women, including your mother.
My mother, my grandmother in some weak way, and so many others,
You mentioned earlier the audiobook.
Yeah.
And which you read, which you read yourself. And I couldn't help but notice that there's a difference in your voice from the early chapters to the later ones.
Oh, you heard it?
And I wondered, because you have such vivid, note perfect recall of your own words, Did you see the story, your mother's story, your story together? Did you see it differently or hear it differently upon having to perform it?
No, because like I said, my books are always already an audio track to me. But I think having to sort of read it out aloud. I mean, when I say an audio track, it's a track inside my head. But when you actually read it aloud and there's someone else sitting there with headphones on, uh, it becomes, it comes out, and it came out a little cracked and broken because it was a performance. I'm not, but that sounds bad. What I meant was because I had to actually speak it out loud, and I wasn't good enough at keeping my control because I felt uh, upset when I was reading that.
As we leave, can you read the dedication of your first book?
The dedication, the God of Small Things, for Mary Roy, who grew me up, who taught me to say excuse me before interrupting her in public, who loved me enough to let me go. For LKC, that's my brother, who, like me, survived. And in this, the dedication is to LKC, my brother. Together we made it to the shore, and to Mary Roy, who never said, let it be. And of course, my brother, in this book, my brother says that she loved me enough to let me go was the only piece of real fiction in The God of Small Things.
Was he right?
Partially, but not wholly, I think, because if you remember at the end of Mother Mary Comes to Me, the last chapter, it's called A Declaration of Love. And she says, she sent me a message just a few months before she died, in which she said, there's no one in the world whom I have loved more than you. And I said, despite everything that happened between us, somehow I knew that to be true. And I responded saying that you are the most unusual, wonderful woman I have known, and I adore you. And actually, I made a little screenshot of that and laminated it, and it's my bookmark for this book. Because it was a savage, thorny, violent sort of love, but it was love. I know it was love somewhere by a person who didn't know how to love.
And now, having written the book, now having brought it around the world, talked about it with people like me who you just met, does that grief that you first felt, does it no longer shock you?
It shocks me still. I still find it very difficult to look at a photograph of her. I still feel that there's a difference in my face for before and after her death. But I just feel that I wanted to share her with the world, all of her, the darkness and the light.
You're not one for manifestos.
No.
Mantras, etc. But I think the closest you've ever come to writing one for yourself about why you do what you do and how you do what you do came from that essay you mentioned earlier, The End of Imagination. This is back in 1998, and I have a passage here from it, which I thought we could close on.
Okay. Mm-hmm. It's from The End of Imagination, and as I said, it was about failure and loss and this kind of strutting that comes into public imagination when you become a nuclear power. So it's a conversation between me and a friend who lived in New York. And I told her the only dream worth having is to dream that you will live while you're alive and die only when you're dead. Which means exactly what? She asked me, and I tried to explain, but I didn't do a very good job of it. Sometimes I need to write to think, so I wrote it down for her on a paper napkin, and this is what I wrote. to love, to be loved, to never forget your own insignificance, to never get used to the unspeakable violence and the vulgar disparity of life around you, to seek joy in the saddest places, to pursue beauty to its lair, to never simplify what is complicated or complicate what is simple, to respect strength, never power, above all to watch, to try and understand, to never look away and never, never to forget.
The last lines you have here. Above all, to watch, to try and understand, to never look away and never, never to forget. And it just reminded me of the description you wrote for yourself as a kid in the new book. The one that watched, the one that took notes, the one that did not speak up but remembered everything, that saw the smallest of details through the keyhole on the river bank, put then in a notebook, transmuted finally,
A mental notebook.
then a physical one, then came to life from a drawing, then in a book. And I know you said if you could have it, I know you said that if I was to go back in time, I would study architecture again. I guess what I wanted to ask is, if you had another go at it, would you choose being a writer?
1,000,000 times yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.